Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really high-stakes geopolitical battle that isn't playing out on some traditional battlefield. It's happening right on the blockchain. We're going through a comprehensive research report that breaks down the European Union's 21st sanctions package, which was adopted in July of 2026. Now, this isn't just your standard run-of-the-mill round of financial penalties. It's actually a massive structural turning point in how a major regulatory bloc treats digital assets. We're going to explore exactly how the EU is attempting to completely dismantle a multi-billion-dollar sanctions evasion network, and why the old ways of regulating crypto, they just aren't cutting it anymore.
To really understand why the EU is taking such drastic measures, we have to look at the sheer scale of the problem. $104 billion. That is a staggering number. According to the data in our source material, this represents the cryptocurrency value received by sanctioned entities in 2025 alone. Just let that sink in for a second. That is a massive 694% surge from the previous year. We aren't just talking about a few bad actors slipping through the cracks here. We're looking at a completely industrialized, hyper-efficient sanctions evasion machine that is totally adapted to the blockchain. Which brings us to Section 1, the crypto whack-a-mole, the cat-and-mouse game of sanctions evasion. So for years, the structural problem regulators have faced is the reliance on this reactive, name-by-name blacklisting model. They find a bad entity, they sanction it, they shut it down. But in the crypto world, this model is literally constantly falling behind. Look at the stark contrast in the data here. Total illicit crypto transaction volume jumped from $57.2 billion in 2024 to an astonishing $154 billion in 2025. This absolute explosion of the sanctions evasion market perfectly sets up why the old enforcement methods are totally failing. When you target a traditional bank, shutting it down physically stops the money. But in crypto, all it takes to move value is a wallet and an internet connection. This massive volume tells us that as the traditional financial system closed its doors to sanctioned Russian actors, they didn't stop moving money. They just completely migrated to the blockchain. To truly grasp the absurdity of this whack-a-mole approach, let's just walk through this timeline of the Garantex exchange. Garantex was this massive conduit for illicit funds. On March 6, 2025, a huge multinational law enforcement operation swoops in, seizes their domain, and freezes over $26 million. Sounds like a massive win, right? Well, barely 2 weeks later, by March 24th, the operators simply relaunched under a brand new name, Grinex. And the kicker? Corporate records showed Grinex was actually incorporated months before the takedown. So actually, scratch that. It wasn't an improvised scramble at all. It was a completely pre-planned contingency. By August 14th, regulators had to step right back in and sanction Grinex all over again. The researchers describe this perfectly with the balloon effect metaphor. When you apply pressure to one end of a balloon, the air doesn't just disappear, right? It just instantly bulges out in another direction. Closing one platform simply pushes the illicit flows to new, pre-positioned entities. For example, when Garantex was hit, users just seamlessly migrated their balances using a custom-built, ruble-pegged stablecoin called A7A5. The network didn't die, it just changed its shape. And that leads us to Section 2, the EU's 21st package, a strategic paradigm shift. Faced with this relentless balloon effect, the European Union realized that targeting individual mice was just a losing game. So on July 23, 2026, they adopted an unprecedented regulatory response. They basically pivoted from targeting individual mice to trapping the whole house. This comparison lays out their fundamental logic shift. On the old strategy side, we have reactive, entity-by-entity tactics that are hopelessly vulnerable to those rapid successor platforms we just talked about. But look at the new strategy of the 21st package. It's systemic, it is jurisdiction level, it's built entirely around a deterrence model. Instead of playing catch-up with whatever new name or crypto exchange decides to adopt tomorrow, the EU is now targeting the core systemic infrastructure that allows these platforms to even exist in the first place. So let's break down the specific legal instruments the EU is using here. There are 3 core actions. First, it bans 14 additional crypto platforms. And what you really should take away from this is that these aren't Russian platforms. They're actually based in third country jurisdictions, places like Georgia, Panama, the UAE, and Kyrgyzstan. And they were chosen specifically because they route Russian-linked flows. Second, it creates a brand new third country ban mechanism. And third, it takes the existing ban on Russian nationals holding governing positions and extends it across all crypto asset services regulated under the EU's MiCA framework. And this brilliantly illustrates the EU's aggressive, systemic intent straight from the leadership. As EU High Representative Kaja Kallas put it, with each round of sanctions, we squeeze Russia's economy. We're hitting over 100 banks and crypto operators. I mean, there is no ambiguity there. This is an aggressive, systemic approach designed to squeeze the evasion networks from every possible angle, practically forcing legitimate platforms to choose between dealing with these shadow networks or maintaining their access to the European market. Moving to Section 3, the third country threat, targeting the enablers. This is where we get into the most powerful and controversial weapon in the whole package. So what exactly is this third country ban mechanism? Well, it's a newly created legal basis that allows the EU Council to legally prohibit all transactions between EU operators and any crypto asset service provider established in a designated third country. Think about how massive that is for a second. It's a blunt market access lever. If a country is found to be hosting platforms that materially enable sanctions evasion, the EU can basically threaten to cut off that entire jurisdiction's crypto sector from the European market.
Let's move to and see how this builds into the broader global strategy. Compare how different global powers are flexing their regulatory muscles here. The US uses secondary sanctions, which can penalize non-US persons globally for providing material support, which is a very broad extraterritorial reach. The UK uses Regulation 17A, which essentially treats crypto exchanges exactly like banks and restricts their correspondent banking access. But the EU's new approach? It sits in its own category entirely, a market access ban targeting entire jurisdictions. It might be narrower than the US approach, but given the massive size of the EU market, it carries immense economic weight.
Now, if you're wondering why the EU feels compelled to use such a heavy-handed instrument to target entire jurisdictions, look at this number, 10x. After the UK designated a major exchange in its affiliates back in May 2026, researchers found that transaction flows to a defined set of successor platforms, like that A7 network we talked about, they didn't stop. They increased tenfold. Almost immediately, over $1 billion just shifted to new platforms. This data proves exactly why entity-by-entity strikes just aren't enough anymore, and why the EU is pivoting to threaten the host jurisdictions themselves. However, we have to remain objective here. As the source report explicitly clarifies, this third country mechanism is currently a totally untested deterrent. As of this report's publication, no country has actually been designated under this power. It is quite literally a regulatory experiment unfolding in real time. So we've got to maintain some epistemic humility. We simply don't know yet if this threat is going to force host countries to clean up their acts, or if it will just cause massive diplomatic friction without actually solving the underlying problem. Finally, Section 4, the unresolved DeFi challenge, the final boss of sanctions evasion. Because here's the thing, even if the third country ban works perfectly, regulators face a final massive complication, decentralized finance, or DeFi, where there is literally no corporate intermediary to sanction. Look at this breakdown of illicit volume. A staggering 84% currently flows through stablecoins. And why? Well, because they're stable, they're liquid, and they're perfect for cross-border settlement. But centralized stablecoins have a major vulnerability for evaders. The central issuer can freeze them. If authorities flag a wallet, the stablecoin company can just lock the funds up. But that central point of control is exactly what these evasion networks are now trying desperately to escape. And that leads to this terrifyingly efficient three-step evasion tactic, which was actually observed in the wild during the Greenwich situation. Step 1, authorities target centralized exchange funds. Step 2, the absolute second the evaders sense pressure, they rapidly swap those funds into non-freezable decentralized tokens. Step 3, those funds are moved entirely into autonomous smart contracts, DeFi, where there is no CEO, no compliance officer, and literally no central operator to hand a subpoena to.
So the crucial point is that this poses a massive legal and technical enforcement gap. Decentralized, non-custodial protocols simply lack a central point of control. We saw this previously when the US tried to sanction the Tornado Cash mixer, only to face huge legal challenges because courts had to grapple with whether autonomous code could even be considered sanctionable property. The EU's 21st package targets jurisdictions and service providers, brilliantly, sure. But it still doesn't squarely solve how you're supposed to sanction a piece of autonomous software running on the blockchain.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. As this geopolitical battle accelerates, and as these evasion networks inevitably pivot away from centralized platforms and deeper into decentralized finance just to escape the EU's new jurisdiction-level threats, can regulators ever effectively sanction autonomous code? Or does the blockchain ultimately represent a hard limit to state-based economic coercion? It's a fascinating question, and one that regulators around the globe are going to have to answer very, very soon. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the systems around you.